Okay, I guess I'll begin with how I got into the current research that I'm working on by accident, as is usually the case. I was named Hydro-Quebec Scholar about 7 years ago, and my reaction to that was, sustainable development, what the hell am I going to do with that? So I walked around and talked to colleagues in my faculty to find out what they would do if they suddenly got a whack of money to study something that they were utterly uninterested in. And what would you do if you were to work on sustainable development? And a lot of people said, Günther Teubner, check that out. I had tried in the past to read Teubner and failed miserably. He is a legal scholar and he draws on Niklas Luhmann, so autopoietic theory. And it turned out to be a perfect vehicle for working on sustainable development, which I reconfigured in my own mind as not a nexus among environment, society, and economy, but rather the intersection among a number of different bodies of expert knowledge. So I'm thinking about science, politics, ethics, law. It seems to me that there's another one, economics, of course. But rather bodies of expert knowledge that come together or fail to come together when we're talking about environment. So one of the things that, in trying to think about the place of law in amongst these other expert discourses, it occurred to me that when we think about environmental law, usually what law is and is conceived of is a kind of plumbing. So another metaphor that I came up with is law as handmaiden. So law is there basically to help things like science, economics, politics be brought to bear on the environment. So by way of example, law as handmaiden to ethics, much of international environmental law, and that's my field, is articulated in the form of a series of very broad, very vague principles, such as sustainable development, the precautionary principle is another one that people know about, common but differentiated obligations, and so on. And when you try to bring these to bear on a concrete environmental problem, you generally fail because the principles are really far too broad. But there is a sense that if you transform them into the language of law, then they will suddenly have some purchase on the world, that they will gain some traction. Similarly, economics. Certainly, economists tend to think of law as a particularly elaborate and sophisticated means of toying with incentive structures. And now on to science, and then I'll leave off. I won't discuss all of them, but science is interesting because obviously it's incredibly important as a body of expert knowledge for environmental law, environmental politics. That's clear. So I mentioned that international environmental law consists of a series of broad and vague principles, but it also consists of a bunch of very specific, context-specific and detailed standards, which are generated largely by scientific knowledge. And then there the idea is that you can take scientific knowledge and translate it into the language of law more or less directly. Transpose it might be a better expression. So you simply take what looks like a scientific conclusion about how much of a pollutant the environment can tolerate, for example, and you make a rule that you can't have more than that amount of pollution in the environment. Straightforward. Of course, this is scientists and those who work with scientists will understand that this is a very naive view of what scientific knowledge is. So this brought me to the notion that I needed to think about the constitution of scientific knowledge. I'm not a scientist, I have no scientific background, so of course I'm drawing on science and technology studies in this effort. One of the insights of autopoietic theory is that different systems in society build models of other systems within their own language, within the context of their own logic. So law clearly has an image or a model of what science is and what scientific knowledge is and how scientific knowledge comes to be constituted, but it's not a very good model. In fact, it's a very weak model. So my thinking is that it would be interesting to see what a richer, more dynamic model of scientific knowledge might look like if it were constituted within law, within the legal system and for the purposes of law. I'm really very much at the beginning of that project. Some of the other places that this takes me have to do with the democratic legitimation of law, which obviously becomes highly problematic in a field like environment, where so much depends on inputs of expert knowledge, including scientific knowledge. What impact does this have then on democratic deliberations and our idea of law as being a product of democratic deliberations in some way. And apparently I'm out of time, which is fine because I've just more or less gotten to the end of my notes. Thanks very much.